Okay, so I wanted to take a little bit of a moment to talk about Vosh and his position on guns, and this is going to be part of my let's critique other leftists right before the election for very petty and minor reasons. But, you know, Vosh and Hassan are two people that I listen to a lot, and they've had some pretty suspect takes, so I would say that um, if I agree with someone 90%, it's fine every once in a while to critique the other 10%. So that's kind of what I want to do here. And Vosh has had this position on guns for a while. This video is 3 years old, so that'd be 2021, and like he's had guns before that. So kind of just talking about that. Got a little bit of Commander going on here in the background, playing some CEDH while I listen to Vosh just talk some stupid shit about guns. And yeah, hopefully we can listen to a few of his ideas and then kind of respond to those. So let's go.
I didn't own what I now call lovingly the Rootin' Tootin' Cowboy gun. That's actually its official model name. And here for Twitch purposes, again, we're displaying, not brandishing. It is unloaded. See, look, it's a Rootin' Tootin' Cowboy gun. Sure, as you can see, it is indeed rootin'. It is indeed tootin'. See, it has all the requirements. It's a nice gun. I like it. It feels good. And when I got it, I remember that people in chat have been asking me to talk about my opinions on guns for a while now, and I figured, were there ever a time? Maybe I wanted to do it at the range, but then I remembered how bad I am at shooting. So far, not going to embarrass myself for a video quite like that. Not yet. So it's at the SW Model 12, the 19 Classic. The 19 Classic. So people ask me often about guns and what my opinions are on guns. I've talked about it a little bit before, but I'm going to talk about it more now, maybe even extensively now, because guns are both a boon and a problem, and the problems we have with guns are very specific to America. You know what they say, that Onion article, no way we could have prevented this, said man from only country where this always happens. You know what I mean? Whether you're talking mass schoolings, whether you're talking mass shootings or school shootings or domestic homicide or God knows whatever else terrible things people do with firearms, we do have a problem with them in this country. Now, the easy line for leftists is, under no pretext shall arms be school shootings. Thank you. But you know what? I didn't like school either. The common leftist line is under no pretext, like everyone deserves a gun, firearms for all, so on and so forth. The reason leftists say that is because one of the ways that states consolidate their power is through a monopolization, both on the legal means to commit and the ability to commit violence. So right now,
okay, so right off the bat here, I think that like this kind of leftist theory is pretty fucking stupid. I don't think that there is a reasonable future where people defend themselves by just using their own arms. I think that we've reached this point where if you are living in nation states, you need to have like a standing military. And like, let's say that we're in this utopia where, what the hell is going on here? What is this? Okay, whatever. I have nothing going on here. I'm F6 basically, but let's say you reach this utopian point in history where there's like a one world government, everyone gets along in peace. I still think that government should have a monopoly on power. I don't think that it's really feasible at this point in time to kind of like have that power be democratized and that power being like tanked. Like, how is that going to work? That's kind of reminiscent of like a libertarian utopia where everyone has different like militaries that they're using on each other. I mean, maybe I'm just not understanding the theory, but also like giving everyone a gun isn't going to make it a Marxist utopian place that you can live in.
Who can legally commit violence in America? Well, the police and the military, unless you're acting specifically in self-defense or it's some niche issue. They're the ones who get to shoot people. That's their job, not the average person's job. That's their job. We've moved away from vigilantism and more towards the centralization of power. And there are benefits to that, by the way. Vigilantism causes a lot of problems, and people who are a little bit itchy with their trigger finger have led to many a corpse left out in the woods with not an investigation to be done type deal. So there are benefits to the consolidation of that power. But there are also downsides that I'll talk about in a little bit. Back when Marx said, under no pretext shall the, arms be surrendered from the proletariat, he was talking in what was undeniably a different time. If you're a good Marxist, you'll know subjects like this have to be discussed within the context of the material conditions in which they were written. And back when Marx was writing that, as I understand it, now I'm not a history savant, but back then I'm pretty sure that the main way that wars were conducted were people would stand 500 feet from each other, fire one round out of a 26-pound gun, and then run forward to bludgeon each other to death with the butts of them. I think that more or less, that's sort of the vibe we were on at that time, which meant a couple of things. First and foremost, that an individual owning a firearm didn't present a mass shooting threat. There were no mass shootings back then. Guns couldn't fire that many times. They weren't as tactically viable as modern-day firearms, where even semi-automatic weapons can hold 20, 30, 40 shots. I think
and I would also say that there's that back when like Marxist theory was first written, there was a pretty less like the difference between a local militia and the federal government's military, I think has grown exponentially, just in the way that technology has improved, where the military has tech that we don't even know about right now. And also the fact that just a single person is being able to do less and less as they're being outscaled by technology. So like a single buff guy might be able to survive a few musket balls and use like the bayonet of his rifle to take down like 3 soldiers. Like you could actually make an impact as a single person back then. Now the biggest impact you can hope to make is igniting yourself on fire and in protest.
Actually, around the time of Marx, they did have repeating weapons, but all the same, not the way we do now. The other main difference between now and then is that back then, the idea of the proletariat rising up to overthrow their government was feasible. I mean, it happened, But if you live in America today, and you know anything about the way our military functions and the kind of tech they have in their hands, you will know, and this is a fact, I'm afraid, that no, not with all the guns in the world, no.
Yeah, so far I'm like in 100% agreement with Vaush. The one thing that I would posit is like his framing of this as a good leftist should, be armed, which is what he said right at the beginning of this, is a little bit suspect. But other than that, I'm in 100% agreement.
No, you need military equipment to face modern militaries. Civilian revolutions do not work against developed first world nations. They may work in some parts of the world, maybe they're less developed, developing nations, maybe there, but here not so much. So what changed? What are the problems we face? And what can we do about them? America, land of the free, has about 400 million firearms in it. This is, I don't know how much this is relative to the total number of guns in the world, but let's just say it's infinity. There is an infinite number of guns in America. There are more guns in America than there are people in America. A lot of those guns are hunting weapons. You have old rifles and shotguns that are used for hunting or for target practice or pellets or what have you. You have handguns, which are by far the most deadly firearm we have because handguns can be concealed. Rifles cannot be concealed, at least not easily, which means that handguns are much more versatile and much easier to use for crimes. And then you have larger weapons that are essentially civilian remakes of military-style guns, like an AR-15, which in most places in America you can't fire automatically, but it's a military rifle. You can imagine it. When the people buy their AR-15s, they strap it on. They've got all the scopes and gadgets on there. They run around. They feel like, it's like I'm back in Iraq. At least it feels closer to it. So with all that being said, America, with our tremendous appreciation for firearms, has a lot of deaths because.
I'm watching Vaush because I'm trying to critique him on his stance on guns. I think it's kind of comical that his position is that like people that are progressive need to be armed so that they can defend themselves from roving gangs of militias, when that has never really happened in history. In terms of like single people defending themselves, like not getting raped, pretty much not getting murdered in their houses. So I'm kind of like working my way up to that position, just watching his history on guns. But yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking about it. I don't think there's like a real reason to have a gun. Like it's fun. If I could have like a big red button that I could press, I would probably make it the law so that you can have like a musket, like what they had in the Revolutionary War times. If people are bitching and crying about, oh, I'm a hunter, you can't take away my guns, Like, that's a skill issue. Level up. You have a bow and arrow, you have a musket, you have a knife, you can go hunting with that. If people are crying that they can't defend themselves, well, the statistics don't support that. The statistics would say that simply by putting a gun into your house, you're making it more dangerous for yourself and your family. It's easier for you to commit suicide. It's easier for your kids to get access to the gun. It's easier for domestic abuse, violence to happen, where you or your spouse will get into an argument and use the gun in like a moment of rage. A decent middle ground would be that if you want to own a gun, it has to be registered inside of like a local neighborhood gun safe or armory, where if you want it to go hunting, you can go check it out, say why you need it. And then, yeah, there's a whole bunch of other crimes like 3D printing guns, being able to like get guns off of the black market and use it for illegal activity. Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, I mean, the thing is this: if there's going to be a civil war, the military is going to side with one side or the other, and it doesn't even really matter if you're armed or not. You're not going to be able to stand up against the military. And you can talk about like guerrilla warfare, like what Palestinians are doing against Israel right now, where I don't even know what kind of war there is, but somehow apparently there's still a war going on, even though Israel's bombed like 90% of the Palestinian buildings into rubble. But at that point, you've already kind of lost the plot. Like, now you're living in a dystopia, and I don't think owning a rifle or a pistol is going to really help you in that scenario. A, you're probably going to be dead. And B, what are you even fighting for at that point? Now you're just trying to survive. It's not like you're defending yourself against right-wing militias. The other thing is, like, we've seen right-wing militias like go after people, and we haven't really had like success with the leftists being armed. I did want to watch this video.
Material that represents them.
Thank you so much.
Because this
century ago, if there were no,
because this is like, you know,
the time nothing
VAUSH'S
particularly
in practice, where leftists will show up and they're armed, and VAUSH gets like a real hard on because of that. He's like, oh look, 6 guys with rifles. I think the only chance for actual socialism in America is through the collapse of the USA, but doesn't mean a lot of meaningful change cannot be made. I mean, yeah, in theory, to get like true socialism, maybe you say that like the collapse of the USA is necessary for that, almost in the same way that in order to have like a free Palestine, Israel needs to just disintegrate. But I would say that you can still have a country named Israel. It just needs to be fundamentally different than what it is currently. And what I mean by that is it's currently an ethno-state. It has to be fundamentally different from an ethno-state in order to have like peace in that region. Like basically just have equal rights for non-Jewish, non-white people. I don't think socialism is achievable in any settler colonialist state. Maybe, I don't know. Like, I think that talking about like your ideal vision of socialism is kind of a fool's errand. What you should be trying to do is just slowly working towards that over like a long period of time. And if conditions get better, then like you can still fight for socialism, but at least you're living in a much better country where, you know, corporations aren't buying out your politicians. But let's just talk about
satisfying comes about from that particular political principle. But every once in a while it does. Take a look at this. Armed volunteers in Texas protect a drag event from a bunch of far-right bigots. The caption tells you all you need to know, but...
Hey, she just spit on me. She just spit on me.
Well, what did you call them earlier when you were talking to them? Didn't you call them a bunch of king pussies?
No, I called them pussies.
Yeah, I mean, these people here.
No, just the ones that are...
So just 2 notes about this. Note number 1, these like protectors, what I don't think they're Antifa, but it's like a leftist militia. They're not really doing anything by having guns there. Like, we've seen right-wing protesters show up at drag shows before, and those right-wing protesters haven't really done anything. Like this chud right here, he's not gonna do anything. He's not gonna show up with, I mean, maybe he has his buddies. Maybe if he had his buddies, he'd be a little bit more violent, but he's probably like walking home from church, he's like with his wife, and he goes over and he's like, fuck these guys, fuck these guys. Like, look at him, he's fucking fat. He doesn't have a gun on him. He's just gonna yell some slurs at these drag queens and then leave. So I don't think that these people being here did anything meaningfully different other than kind of scaring these guys. But even if these guys weren't scared, they're fundamentally cowards. So even like a trans person standing up to them would kind of make them tuck their tail between their legs and walk away. And that's the other thing. Like, you don't need guns to have this effect. 8 guys standing there clad in black, kind of just like making a human wall, would have that same effect. The assault rifles are kind of meaningless. The assault rifles are just a reminder of like, I could easily murder you right now. And that's all the guns are. Like, they're just a way to murder people. So when they talk about self-defense or even political change, I really don't buy it, because like, unless you're advocating for political violence, I think A, you can have political violence without guns, and B, you can have political change without violence too. So well, that's true. I do think that, like, if you're talking about true socialism, you would need to completely disintegrate city states or nation states altogether. Like, I don't think you can have true socialism where let's say even in the US, maybe everyone has like all healthcare is paid for through your taxes, and all housing is paid for through your taxes. There's public transportation. It's like kind of everything that people right now want, and it's kind of like a paradise for them. But I don't think you can really call that socialism if your phones are being made by slaves, basically, in Indonesia, or your clothes are being made in Thailand by people being paid like 2 cents an hour. I don't think that would be true socialism. In that way, I don't think that you can really have like protectionist policies or a real way that that corporations can like outsource jobs to people that wouldn't have the same standard of living as the people that they're selling their products to. And so in that way, like, almost, yeah, I guess it's kind of like cheesy and cliche, but like the workers of the world would need to have a socialist revolution together. And I mean, I don't really understand like the connection between settler colonialist state. I just think that like the United States is pretty clearly still an imperialist state, where you have like the imperial core, which is living in the mainland United States, and especially in like very expensive cities. And then you're outsourcing a lot of like menial labor tasks to people with much lower standards of living. So I think that's kind of like the main hurdle I see to having an imperialist nation state. That's kind of like the main hurdle for an imperialist nation state, to getting socialism. Anyway, let's just continue this event.
Wielding AR-47.
So what are you here to do today?
I'm here to support people that don't indoctrinate and groom little 8-year-old kids. Credulous.
So why do you need to get in someone's face?
I wasn't. I was walking over here to talk somewhere.
So the gist of it was there was just a drag brunch event. I mean, nothing sinister. No one's getting hurt, obviously. But there were going to be counter-protesters at this event. Well, I guess they're protesters, not counter-protesters. The far-right people who showed up, they're not counter-protesting because the drag brunch itself is not a protest. Anyhow, what we see here is a perfect exemplification of the ideal of responsible gun use for political purposes, okay? And I've said this before. Do not bring guns to protests unless you are operating as a single unit of people who are working together and are well-trained and know what you need to be doing and are not there to start violence or anything like that, okay? Now, a line of people wielding rifles standing on a curb right here it's actually, this is
Yeah, I do agree that settler colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism are all tied together. I guess when I was hearing you say settler colonial, I was assuming that you meant like, you know, genocided the native people living there and colonized the land. And I do think that, like, even though those are horrible things that happened, I do think that you could, like, have a socialist country in a place that was genocided. Like, obviously, a lot of reparations would have to happen. Okay, what's going on here in this deck? I have this Fury of the Horde. I can play that card if I discard it. And so I can exile 2 red spells. I have a Bolt Bend. Oh, I can play all of these cards. Okay, that's great. So, just going to attack this guy. But yeah, like, I don't know. Talking about like what true socialism is a little bit pie in the sky for me. I think that there's so many issues that have pretty easy fixes that we can push for right now that it's almost irrelevant to talk about like what true or pure socialism is and working towards that. And I do think that there are pretty meaningful federal bans that you can do to really rein in guns, like gun violence in this country. Okay, so I discarded 6 cards. I need to draw 6 cards. I think I'm just going to exile all of these. Okay, and I drew a Fury. That's cool. So then I can go to my second main phase. Use 5 of the mana for this spell, World at War. Oh, I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. Discarded all of... Oh, wait, no, it's fine. I can play that card this turn. Alright, so... Tap these. Now, there's only one... Wait. Null Rod. Oracle. Aegis. Shadow Spear. Oh, 2? They're on 2 CMC? Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to attack him. No! So I don't deal any damage. That sucks. Ugh, okay, that's fine, I guess. Let's see how much I can do here. He's a 6/7. I don't think I can kill him. Alright, well, kind of just gonna throw this game, but it's fine. Alright, Seething Song. Can't cast 2 CMC spells, so this Raku I should have just like get exiled. Could do Pinnacle Monk and get a card back. Or I could do Platinum Angel, and that's pretty spicy also. Six, 7. Don't know how to get through that. I would say settler colonialism is not exclusive to the US and Israel, but also countries like Canada. Oh yeah, for sure. Like pretty much North America, even South America to an extent. I'm not playing this game super well, but it's whatever. Oh my god. Okay. Well, whatever. My play partner's conceded. All right, let's continue this.
Rare example of American
Our constitution says that the kingdom of Norway is indivisible. It cannot give self-determination to the Sami people. Yeah, I mean, what countries are really going to, let themselves get broken up and give land and power back to the people that they had already colonized? And basically it's a form of genocide to, take away someone's self-determination, self-governance, come in and just tell them that, we're just gonna give you laws that you have to follow now.
Chauvinism, because it is universal language, and it is do not f with us. And no one will f with you. If you have a group of a half dozen or so people with rifles just standing in all black outside of an event, no one will f with you. Why?
Okay, so Vaush is getting really excited here because he's like, oh, no one's gonna fuck with us. No one's gonna fuck with you. It's kind of funny because it's like, okay, people wouldn't mess with you if there's 10 guys standing in all black anyway. So the guns are, again, they're irrelevant. The guns aren't doing anything. And this is a through line that you see every pro-gun argument. They're not doing anything. Oh, you like guns because it makes you feel powerful. Buy a knife. You like guns because they're fun to play with. Buy Legos. They're complete. There's nothing that guns are good for except for murdering people, that you can't do other things, that you can't be replaced with things that are just as good but aren't as good as murdering people. And that's my main issue with the guns. There's no good argument for them. And Vaush is like, oh yeah, I'm collecting guns because I like collecting them and I like learning about them. It's either I buy guns or expensive cars. It's bro, you're literally proving my point that the only reason people like guns is because it's fun, and there's no real use for guns. Ah, man.
Would they? That would be insane. There are actually more of them than were present here. And this was actually a pre-existing group, too. It wasn't just a bunch of people who organized this over Facebook or whatever. This right here is the Elm Fork John Brown Gun Club, a legacy worth preserving if ever there was one, promoting and assisting marginalized communities and organizing community defense against white supremacists and fascism, not a militia. Perfect stuff right there, okay? This is what you want to see. You don't just want people all hopped up on being a...
That's interesting. It does seem like there is way more indigenous representation in Latin American countries than there are in just North American countries. So that's interesting. That's something that I should look more into, the different methods of colonization.
Aggressive, bringing guns to protest, because all that does is get people hurt. And you may Pepe post, but this isn't a militia. The point of this is, if you've got people who might be hassled by far-right protesters in an area, a couple of people who will just stand there like statues holding guns and cameras are really all you need. You don't want...
Again, you don't even need the guns. You just, look at these guys. If they're standing like that without the guns, that would still intimidate people and make them go away.
It's not about mobilizing a group of people for a...
does security at concerts or other events walk around with these assault rifles? No, they're intimidating because they're all in uniform and you know what their purpose is, that they're going to enforce the rules of the venue. They're going to kick you out if you act unruly. They're big guys. A lot of times security does kind of stand in lines like that. And they don't carry assault rifles to get their message across.
Political or militaristic purpose. It's just about, here's the tools that you need to provide security to your own event. Shit. And that's not forming a militia. This isn't even a particularly controversial expression of our Second Amendment rights right here. This is just plain old event security, except it's free.
Yeah, Vaush is saying it's event security. I mean, You don't need assault rifles to provide security at events. Like, very specifically, they do not carry assault rifles because they know it makes it more dangerous to have assault rifles at events than it does if you're just like a big burly buff guy standing there with like your beefy arms hanging out of your tight little shirt. Like, just think about it. Think about the logistics. You have an assault rifle. There's hundreds, thousands of people milling around. Most shootings are stopped by unarmed people. If you're a security guard, the gun is actually a liability because it can be taken off of you fairly easily, especially in like crowded areas like this. That's why a lot of shootings get stopped by unarmed people, or the shooters are going to be in like high up secluded areas so they can actually like get shots off. If you're in a protest like this or in a large venue, the guns are going to be a liability. That's funny. I guess, I don't know, the encomienda system seems like something that like a lot of colonial empires relied. It seems like something that a lot of colonial empires did, where they relied on indigenous populations for cheap labor. Maybe it was just that the Spanish Empire was like less racist and bloodthirsty, genocidal than some of the other colonial empires, because like we see that a lot where, you know, you're getting a lot of good resources out of kind of the oppressed populations, and then you just kill them off anyway. Like, that's kind of what happened in Nazi Germany, where they had Jews in concentration camps basically working as slaves, and they also had a lot of skilled laborers in concentration camps, and they're just like, our hatred is worth more to us than our like economical savviness. Let's just get rid of them.
And cooler when it's being done by actual members of the community. It is real good stuff. Love to see it. Many conservatives and fascists are cowards after all. That is true. However, not wanting to fuck with people holding rifles is not a cowardice. It's actually a very reasonable mantra by which to live life. Totally legitimate, that one. Anyway, let's finish the little video, huh?
I was walking over here to talk to somebody, and this one, you're gonna go, get away, you can. All right, who do you need to talk to? I wanted to go talk to somebody. None of your business what I want to talk to.
I mean, also just like, oh yeah, look at how peaceful it is now that they have guns. Like, it's not really diffusing any kind of situation. I mean, we saw this in what's that fucking little like shit eater's name? The guy who shot 2 people in Wisconsin, and now he's like a hero for the right because he got away with murdering 2 people. I don't even fucking remember that little shit guy's name.
Okay, all right, I know, because I thought this was a public sidewalk. I'm being peaceful. I was just going to talk to somebody. Look, I was just going to talk to someone. I get my 5 of those.
God, look at these guys. I think policing the police was pretty good, but I don't know if you really need guns for that. Maybe it's different now where you have social media and you can like record infractions that the police did. Now that everyone has a camera in their pocket, but the thing is this: should the police have guns? I don't think even the police should have guns. I think that like you should have like SWAT teams, like special forces, special operations police that have guns and they can charge in and murder people that need to be murdered. But just day-to-day interactions with police, they should not have guns on them. Tasers, fine. Nightsticks, whatever. Like, they can beat you up without a nightstick. And in like in a perfect world, the police wouldn't have guns, and then you wouldn't need guns to follow them. A correct step to that world would be, I think, having like VAUSH is talking about, oh, you should get to know your neighbors, you should have guns to defend your neighborhood. I think that like that's fine. Like getting to know your neighbors, kind of building a coalition there. The issue is just owning the gun and carrying it around does increase the risk of violence, which I think a lot of the times is unnecessary. I don't think that even really policing the police, you needed to have the guns, because you're kind of asking for violence that way. The police are going to get triggered if you follow them with or without guns. And maybe they're going to be like, I know police are all cowards, so maybe they're going to be a little bit more scared of you if you have guns. But like, if you're three guys, like even without anything, not even with sticks, not even with knives, you're just walking around, that's going to be more intimidating for the police than just like one single guy. But like, if we are at this position where we need to like be armed for whatever reason, then yeah, well run, well organized militia with guns stored in a local armory. Just like, get the guns out of the fucking house. The biggest thing that I don't like about VAUSH'S opinion is he's like, oh, if you're too mentally unstable to own a gun, then obviously don't buy one. It's like, dude, that's not how fucking mental illness works. You're not gonna be like, oh, I'm mentally unstable, I might kill myself, I'm gonna buy a gun. And then if you're like, no, I'm feeling pretty good today, I'm gonna buy a gun, and then like you have that gun in your house, that's always going to be an option for you if you ever get into that mind state of, I might want to kill myself, I might want to kill other people, I might want to go do violence. And so I do think that VAUSH is like advocating for a lot of harm by telling people to buy guns, bring a violent weapon into their house. Just for the hypothetical scenario that one day the government might break down enough where there's roving gangs of militias, and you're somehow going to be trained enough with the gun to defend yourself by murdering the people that come to your door and harass you. They use claw spears instead of tasers so they can pin a suspect against a wall while keeping their distance instead of tasing them. Yeah, I really don't understand tasing, because I've seen so many videos of people getting tased and they just don't react. They're just like, it's annoying. And then they just like keep walking. Or like there was this one cop in Minnesota who's like pulls out her gun and she's like, taser, taser. And then she just like shoots the guy like 3 times. And it's like, oh, that was my gun. It wasn't a taser. And then obviously, yeah, like tasing doesn't really immobilize them. It kind of does the opposite, where they're on the ground thrashing around. It does seem pretty dangerous. I think policing in the United States is pretty fucked up. Okay, this is kind of boring. I want to see VAUSH. Okay, this is funny.
Oh yeah, wait, hold on. Wait, do you guys?
So this is funny, VAUSH showing off his guns because
here, hold on.
He likes.
No, well, too late. I bought them and I'm showing him. Okay, look, we got a rifle. It's YouTube.
He wants to like collect something cool. Like,
look, it's a goddamn rifle. See? It's like a pistol but longer.
Anyway, VAUSH loves this aesthetics bullshit. Like, he's all into fashion and stuff. He likes these guns. He has a tattoo now. All aesthetics. Aesthetics are fine. But like, come on, be aware of what a gun is and statistically what it does to this country. That's all I'm kind of asking from it. And he is aware, but I do think his kind of love for these aesthetics is, and his love for firing guns. It's just a fun thing that a lot of people like. People get very invested in it monetarily and as part of their personality. And as a result, it's kind of like the sunk cost fallacy. They make it a part of themselves. And if you're then advocating for gun control, or like, or if you're rebuking them for owning guns and you're like, oh, that's so dangerous, why do you have a gun? They take it as a personal affront to them. And I do think that VAUSH falls into this category, like, pretty clearly. Is gun control the answer? Is this a debate? I want to see. I wanted to see VAUSH do a debate on guns. Ideas are dangerous. Yeah, exactly. Like, I had a BB gun. I actually kind of want to go to a gun range, just because I've never actually fired a real gun, and I'm sure people are going to be like, oh, well, have you even shot a real gun? And it's like, I've shot a BB gun before. Is it similar to that? I think that'd be funny.
I don't remember exactly.
Official to make your call to action buy guns. Do you not see how there could be a bit of conflict there?
Well, because I've always said that you shouldn't buy guns if you feel like you're not mentally well enough to handle them. I've always been pretty clear about that.
I mean, this is pretty crazy. The fact that the fact that this guy's like, oh, it's dangerous for people to own guns, and then Vaush is like, well, I've said if you're not mentally well enough to own a gun, then you shouldn't buy one. It's like, that is kind of a very ignorant and almost a deflection, because I do feel like Vaush is smarter than that, because there are so many other reasons why you shouldn't buy a gun other than, oh, I'm feeling depressed in this specific time period. Like, obviously, don't buy a gun if you want to kill yourself. That's kind of what Vaush is saying here. Or he's like, if you're in, like, a bad place in your life, you shouldn't buy a gun. But he's kind of, like, how are you going to know that? That's such a gray category. Again, even if you're not going to kill yourself, there are so many ways in which it's bad for you to buy a gun. Like, it could get stolen from you. Your kids could shoot you with it. Your friend could find it and like accidentally go off or kill you or something. Like a domestic dispute where either you shoot your wife or your wife shoots you. Like I mean, this happened pretty recently, but my mom's great uncle or whatever, his wife grabbed his hunting rifle and shot herself in the head because she was off her medications and she was depressed. No one realized it, and she swallowed the wrong end of a rifle, and we were at her funeral like a week later. Like, there are so many ways where guns make it easier for violence to occur. And again, Vaush saying, oh, well, we should have guns for this one hypothetical circumstance where government breaks down enough and we have the perfect conditions for right-wing gangs to start roaming through the streets, then, I mean, okay, first of all, like, that's a very small thing that could happen. And let's say that if you buy a gun and buying the gun saves your life in that circumstance, I would still say don't fucking buy a gun, because there are so many other more likely circumstances that could happen where you or someone you love could get hurt in your endeavor of buying a gun. And I'm not even gonna really get into the logistics of how having a gun in that situation would save yours or someone you know's life. Yeah, exactly. It was like a few weeks ago where a kid got his, I mean, I think it was the dad bought him a gun. Yeah, like, it was a few weeks ago where a kid did a school shooting and the dad bought him a gun, and both of them were arrested. But in the Uvalde school shooting last year, you had a kid who I believe got the gun from his grandpa because he shot his grandma. And it's just like, even if you're mentally stable, people are going to know. People in your life are going to know you have a gun. And 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be securing it properly to the point where they are not going to be able to have access to it. So, I mean, this entire debate isn't the gun question. I think, like, the first 20 minutes is, so I want to listen more to this.
Right, but with the amount of...
This is basically what I would be criticizing Vaush for.
With the rhetoric from the Republican Party, don't you feel that owning a gun is not...
I mean, this guy's, like, a fucking lib. He's really stupid. This guy calling in, he's like, oh, well, your rhetoric is bad. It's like, it's not just his rhetoric is giving people the wrong impression. He's actually advocating for bad ideas in this circumstance.
Thing when you're part of a marginalized community, that the social conditions aren't going to get much better for them?
No, I think it's a good thing for them to own guns, especially because they're part of a minority group.
Okay, so Vaush is kind of contradicting himself here. He's saying, like, if you're not mentally stable enough, don't buy a gun. But then this guy's saying, oh, well, if these people are going to be in social conditions that are very bad, don't you think that would make them mentally unstable? And he's like, no, well, they should have guns because of the bad social conditions, which is kind of an inherently contradictory stance to have.
Okay, but can you define genocide, first of all? Because what do you necessarily mean when you say genocide?
All right, whatever, I don't care.
Or, like, socially through ostracization to the point that they have to.
you're going to need guns to protect, like, over the tyranny of the government, right? If this were to escalate to actual death camps and not just the social ostracization that's happening now, which with the suicide rates being as high as they are, like, you can't deny that that's like part of of.
Oh, that's really interesting. They were inspired by American school shootings. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I wonder if, I mean, in America, there's school shootings happening every day, so it's kind of like hard to put myself out of that position into being in a place where it's like shocking that a school shooting would happen. But it is interesting that maybe you wouldn't even have the idea to do a school shooting. And that's why the original Trump assassination in July was really interesting, because you had the classic school shooter archetype where he's like a social loner, politically apathetic, access to guns, seemingly radicalized by these like anti-political YouTube shows where instead of funneling them into a party, they were funneling their audience into like darker places where like both parties are bad, both parties are out to get you, both parties are trying to ruin your life. And that's kind of like the archetypical school shooter, but instead of shooting up a school, he tried to assassinate the president, which was, I mean, it's almost a welcome change to seeing kids getting shot at. And I do think like and that's another reason why, like, even though that was like almost notable for a school shooting, but it wasn't notable for an assassination attempt, because people were like, yeah, we've seen that before. Who cares? And then we just moved on from that. So that's just how bad the state of America is in terms of gun violence.
Social conditioning, right? Like, those numbers aren't there for no reason. It's because of the culture we've made for trans people. And,
yeah, I should note
okay,
that
so with
when
further
people
extremism
talk
from the Republican Party,
wait,
this problem's only going to get worse.
Well,
Don't you see how it's problematic to be making that call to action when we're not at that point yet? And even when we do get to that point, how are citizens owning guns, in any sense, going to protect against an action from an authoritarian government?
I'm not sure if I understand the relationship between these variables. By that logic, any trans activism is going to exacerbate the reactionary response, which would then exacerbate the social conditions that increase the suicidality of trans people. So by that logic, like, anything good you do would actually be bad. So I don't know if that necessarily follows. The gun ownership isn't about defending yourself against the government either. It's about defending yourself against social unrest. If our government ever balkanizes or freezes or shuts down, or if there's instability following a coup attempt or anything like that, in which case you wouldn't be fighting the government, you would be protecting your neighborhood against roving right-wing militias, which interpersonally, distributed firearms are actually a pretty effective counter to.
Okay, but wouldn't you agree that we're not necessarily at that point yet?
You don't wait until you're at that point to buy the guns. When you're at that point,
Gun violence, gang violence has been steadily on the rise. Violence there is due to immigration. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty classic, like, kind of being racist, saying that, oh, well, violence is on the rise because we're just getting more violent people in the country, rather than talking about the social conditions that lead to that violence, lead to the gangs that have to form instead of relying on, like, social structures that the government is providing. Instead of being like incorporated into the country, assimilating, you have people that are kind of being pushed onto the outskirts of society and having to like do their own thing, that are being forced into crime. So yeah, like I obviously don't know off the top of my head the root cause of gang violence in Sweden and Denmark, but I do think that it's a pretty safe prediction to blame it on austerity politics. And like, it is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because if you're not going to support the black and brown people that are coming to the country, they're obviously going to turn to crime. And then you can say, we didn't support them because they're criminals, and now look at all the crime they're committing. We're proven right by that regard. I mean, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in, the other way too, where you're saying, oh, well, these people aren't doing crime, we should provide them with more social support, and then their crime will decrease, and that can happen. I mean, that's not really, I don't know, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, 10 to 20 years is kind of a optimistic prediction. I think you're a little bit closer than that. I mean, let's just hope that Trump loses this election, but
it's too late to buy the guns. You buy the guns before you're at that point.
Okay. I mean, I guess I don't really have anything to say about that. I mean, I still disagree with the, potential outcome, but I suppose that makes sense in context. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, this guy's basically saying trans people shouldn't really buy guns because the social conditions are really bad and I'm afraid they're going to kill themselves. And Vaush is saying, well, the social conditions are really bad, so they should buy guns so that they can defend themselves. But what Vaush isn't really realizing is that they're way more likely to kill themselves than they are to successfully defend themselves with a gun. That's kind of like my main point of contention here. Let's continue.
You want to say?
I wouldn't want to put it back that far. If you put it back too far, then the conditions might advance to a point where, and gun shop owners tend to be a pretty reactionary group. If they have any explicit agendas they decide to act on in social unrest, it probably wouldn't be in our favor.
But don't you see what I'm saying, though, for you as a public figure to be making these claims? Because I get that you can point to historical context that what's going on right now could potentially lead to that sort of social unrest. But the fact that we're not here now, don't you kind of see how you could be actualizing the situation?
No, I don't think so.
This is a stupid fucking, like, oh, your rhetoric is dangerous type of thing. And it's like Vaush talking about that people should arm themselves is somehow going to bring about right-wing militias more. That's kind of a crazy thing to say.
Sought to defend themselves. These things happen whether they want them to or not. Republicans have never backed off their messaging or backed off their policy prescriptions in response to anything happening in reality. If they were reality, responsive, then they wouldn't have to lie constantly in order to justify their behavior.
Okay, right. That's all true. Like, call out the Republicans, but luckily we still have a democracy. Luckily, I think wouldn't it be better to put your energy towards making sure the Democrats win? Not to live out on you or anything, but
again, stupid. Like, you can advocate for people to buy guns and help the Democratic Party. Kind of a stupid, like, libbed up thing for this guy to say. He just doesn't like he doesn't like Vaush talking about the guns, but he's not really taking the time to identify the reasons why it's bad. He's just like, it gives him a bad feeling, rather than talking about, like, what are going to be the outcomes if people follow through on Vaush's advice. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder what the conditions were that caused neoliberalism in the UK or in, like, in Norway to slow compared to, like, other areas. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting thing to think about. I think that, like, in the United States, neoliberalism was definitely, like, a conscious decision to swing to be a more centrist party, kind of abandoning workers and more progressive ideals, like under Clinton and Obama. But honestly, like, I would need to, like, do more research into that to have a more well-informed discussion on it. But I do think that, like, in terms of, yeah, like, I don't know, under Biden, it seems like we haven't really gotten more centrist, and it seems like the same with Harris, where we haven't really gotten more centrist. Like, we're definitely getting a centrist pull. I do think that, like, the progressive left has been at least vocal, making noise, trying to drag the party to the left. Like, Kamala Harris had supported Medicare for All in 2016, and that was a large part because of Bernie Sanders. So I think Bernie did a good job, like, kind of pushing people more to the progressive side. But yeah, it's definitely interesting seeing how, like, the party's positions have shifted.
just saying the rhetoric in general kind of inherently detracts, because what you're doing is making a call to action against political extremism instead of focusing on the greater point of how can we get political extremists out of office.
But I don't want political extremists out of office. I want my political extremists in office. They can't do that if they're all dead, so they should probably get guns while they can.
But you see, what you're saying right now, like when they're all, like, don't you see how what you're saying is like exaggerative?
No? people, members of minority groups have died before as a product of social instability and state oppression. It's been known to happen.
Right, but this genocide you're referring to, the further escalation, what I'm saying is it hasn't happened yet, and there's still...
I mean, this is kind of a stupid conversation that they're having. This guy's like, oh yeah, well maybe they will need guns, but shouldn't they just buy the guns when the right-wing militias are attacking them? Like, that's kind of a stupid position to have. VAUSH'S has a stupid position to have. I just think like the whole conversation of I'm gonna buy a gun to defend myself against the hypothetical right-wing militias when they come in is stupid. Both the hypothetical right-wing militias is stupid, and defending yourself against the hypothetical right-wing militias is stupid. If you really are concerned about that, and you really want to come up with a defense against it, you gotta move into a community where you know the people, you know their political values, and you can rely on your neighbors. Or, like, even if you're not living in direct neighborhoods with these people, you need to have a community that you can rely on. Having another place to go is going to be so much safer than owning a gun where you can, like, shoot one guy before your house gets grenaded. Like, it's crazy. There's so many different ways you can defend yourself against this type of thing than buying a gun, and I really think it's just VAUSH likes collecting guns. And I do think VAUSH gets a kick out of being the edgy leftist that can brandish a gun into the camera. He really does like shitting on people like me, where it's like, oh, guns are too dangerous, you shouldn't get them. And he's like, I'm the guy with the gun. I'm gonna show everyone.
I would say a decent chunk of conservatives that can be moved over.
Made the
By
bourgeoisie
pointing
more
out this
careful
political
here.
extremism. So
The
I'm just
Labour
saying
Party
what
had
we're
already
doing is
moved
just
to the
counter
right.
political extremism when we could
Oh,
be
that's
dealing
interesting.
with
That's
the political
funny.
extremism.
That's a funny idea to think of. So it's like, if we can't push the workers too hard because socialism is right next door. That's funny.
That already exists, instead of just creating, more of this rhetoric to go around.
Advocating for our Second Amendment rights, if anything, would probably make us even more appealing to the conservatives that you think can be brought over. But
Again, stupid. Why are you trying to appeal to conservatives? Well, like, what's going on here? Oh, like, just have a gun and then conservatives are gonna love you?
wait until the conditions are at their worst to prepare. You hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And that hopeful part means that, maybe this stuff never comes about.
Okay, preparing for the worst is not buying a gun. I'm not going to keep repeating myself here, but it's just straight up not buying a gun. That's not how you prepare for conservative militias attacking you.
Joe Brandon's been active lately. Maybe they actually take this shit seriously and they cripple the Republican Party by arresting their key members for one of the innumerable crimes they've no doubt committed. And then after they've done that, maybe things go on the down low for a bit. And, I guess then we have some extra guns that we can practice with. I don't know, go to the range.
That's not a good thing. Having extra guns
I don't
in the
know.
house
What
is
I'm
not
saying
a good
is
thing.
just what you're saying right now and how you're bringing all of this into your rhetoric. That does make an effect. And I think that does perpetuate violence on the other side as well. Because the way they're going to interpret that, the more this type of language
this is
gets
stupid.
popularized
No conservative is going to be watching VAUSH. No conservatives watching VAUSH and being like, oh my god, he's telling trans people to buy guns. Come on, we got to get the gang together. Like, this guy's ridiculous. He's crazy.
There's no relationship. They will say whatever they want and their base will believe it. The idea that you have to limit yourself because if you go if you ascend your power level, you'll give them more ammunition. It's not true. There's an entire cottage industry of conservatives.
I did debate VAUSH once, and I debated him on the Yemen, like when America was bombing Yemen because the Houthis were attacking ships that were going through the Red Sea that were due to Israel. And don't want to toot my own horn, but I did wreck him in that debate, and history proved me right. A few months later, he was like, oh, well, I always said that we shouldn't bomb Yemen if it's not going to lead to an end in the war. And before I called in and did that debate with him, he's like, this is how you stop pirates. You take a pirate, you bomb the pirate, and then there's no pirates anymore. It's like, bro, we've just been through 6 months of Palestine getting bombed into the dust, and still Israel saying that Hamas is there. If Hamas is surviving, then you don't think the Irani-backed Houthis that are just getting their weapons shipped to them 100 miles from Iran are going to be stopped by a few bombs from America? And of course the bombing didn't stop the ships from getting attacked, or it didn't help shipping go back through. So I do have a 100% win rate in debating Vosh.
Fabricated crisis, you know? Right now, this whole trans thing, completely fabricated crisis. It's not being caused by, like, neo-pronoun xenogender types on Twitter. If it weren't for, like, the furries, it's not as though Republicans wouldn't have decided to go after these degenerates or, you know, however they justify it.
There was almost a revolution here in Norway in the 1920s. After the economic crisis in the October Revolution had happened, but it was avoided by appointing a coalition government. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that revolution almost has lasted you like 100 years. So, I guess you're just about out of goodwill from like the progressives.
They're going to do it anyway, and they'll create pretext, you know. And they did this back in Germany too, you know. It was like, oh well, you know, this Jewish guy got.
All right. So Vosh has now brought up Nazi Germany and how guns helped the Jews defend themselves against the Germans, because we all famously know that Jews that had guns protected themselves. So let's hear Vosh talk about this fact. He brought up Nazi Germany. This other guy didn't bring it up.
Pretext, you know, and they did this back in Germany too, you know. It was like, oh well, you know, this Jewish guy got in a tussle, a bar fight with a Nazi, you know, and killed him with it, you know, broke a bottle over his head. If only that hadn't happened, then maybe the Holocaust wouldn't have happened, because there was all this media. This actually happened. All this media, you know, drumming up like, oh look, the Jews are killing us, whatever.
Okay, whatever. He's just talking about how like right wing narratives get whipped up just from lies, and they'll lie and say whatever they want anyway, which I agree with.
Holocaust would have happened anyway. They'll justify it how they can, but you can't say to yourself, you know, oh, I won't protect myself. I won't engage in preventative defense.
I mean, again, this would be a great opportunity for this guy to be like, okay, well, how did owning guns help the Jews protect themselves against the Nazis in Nazi Germany?
Because it might make things worse from them. You know, you can't believe that. That's what they want you to believe, because then they keep you weak while they ramp up the rhetoric anyway.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, so, like, were the Jews kept weak because they didn't have access to guns? Would guns have, like, helped them not be weak?
But I also just think I can't get my head around the idea that what you're saying, in the event of further action on the right, would guns do more harm than good in terms of self-defense and suicide? Because over half of suicides are used with guns. I mean, that's really the biggest problem with gun ownership in this country. I mean, suicide is more likely with a gun than a homicide, right?
I think so.
So just in
yeah,
basic
I think
terms.
they're at least very close. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so do you not see how you're stirring up a potential problem there
Well,
in the event of political extremism?
I don't really think it's fair to just say, like, you know, oh, the right-wing militias are arming themselves. You might be able to defend yourself if you did the same, but your demographic has a slightly higher chance of mental instability on account of social, factors. So you can't do that. You know, I mean,
Well,
I have to
I'm
trust
just
people
saying
to
in general,
exercise.
that's the reason. I'm just saying in general, that's a reason I don't support advocacy for gun ownership. I think it's counterintuitive.
Well,
But that is a good point you made. I'm just still.
So we have here, this is in 2021, 54% were suicide, 43% was murder, and 3% was other. I wonder what that is, like accidents? Undetermined circumstances. The remaining gun deaths that year were accidental, involved in law enforcement. Wow, so they're not categorizing law enforcement as murder? That's kind of funny. But yeah, again, like, Vosh is like, oh, it's not really fair to say that you shouldn't have a gun because you're going to kill yourself, but you should have a gun because, like, you needed to defend yourself when, you know, you are much more likely to kill yourself than you are to actually successfully defend yourself. After World War II, there came another coalition government which further moderated the Labour Party. Then the government accepted the Marshall Plan, entered NATO, and expelled communists from the party. Ooh. Damn, so I guess the US really really is to blame to help fuck you guys up. That's unfortunate, but not very unexpected. Man, that is crazy.
Afraid we're not even close enough yet to the idea of Republican militias running rampant.
Well, it happened back during Black Lives Matter. The Patriot Prayer Boys were driving around Portland. You know, you get these dumb fucks in their $80,000 pickup trucks that have never even touched mud before, and you've got 5 or 6 of them in the bed of the truck with their ARs, you know, just like hooting and hollering at people. If things ever really went to shit in this country, you know, like properly, I mean, like some kind of federal government, you know, like political stalemate or a constitutional crisis, like something like that, you know, something really bad. Those groups, those opportunists, they would leap into their local left-leaning cities and try to do what they've been fantasizing about for decades, which is the day of the rope. You know, they're going to run on in there and they take America back, which to them involves what they've been training for, which is the use of their civilian firearms to just reconquer comparatively less well-armed liberal areas. And that's what I want us to be prepared against.
Okay, this is so crazy. He's like, right-wing militias are going to try to reconquer liberal areas. First of all, I think Americans are too fat to do any of this shit. Maybe they'll get in their truck and drive around, but they're not getting out of their fucking truck. And most likely they're going to stay at home, maybe invite some friends over and drink beers on their couch inside the garage while, like, playing with their dicks and their guns. And then the second thing is reconquer? What the hell is he talking about? He thinks they're going to, like, claim, like, take over areas of the city and just claim it as their own. Like, if they do go into their trucks, drive into cities, and like try to murder people, they're just gonna be shooting around. They're not gonna take over. They're not gonna go house to house and try to take over these houses. That's a completely insane thing VAUSH said. There's never really been an example of that, at least that he's talked about, or that I can think of in history. If there's ever been any kind of conquering, that's been done as part of, like, with the go-ahead from the government. And if you're a trans person with a pistol, you're not going to be able to stop that anyway. Like, if people are conquering your neighborhoods, the government is involved. And if the government is involved, VAUSH himself has said owning a gun's not going to be able to do anything. Secretary General. Oh man, don't get me started on NATO. That's a whole other topic of conversation. I mean, okay, so my view on NATO is that it's basically just the foreign policy of the United States. So, like, a lot of progressive and leftist people will want to criticize NATO. I'm like, why target the middleman? Skip the middleman and just criticize the United States' foreign policy. That's why I don't really understand it when guys like Hassan will be like, oh, fuck NATO. NATO's so bad. It's like, why are you talking about NATO? It's just the foreign policy of the United States. Go criticize the United States' foreign policy if you care. And I also kind of think it's hilarious that Putin cites NATO as an excuse to invade Ukraine. Because he's like, oh, well, if they're geographically right next to Russia, then we're going to be in trouble. It's like, it's still just the United States. I don't think it really matters. Yeah, they're essentially vassals of the U.S., but there's also vassals of the U.S. that aren't involved in NATO. Like, maybe you can say that if Ukraine entered NATO, then there would be more liberties afforded to it, where, you know, we can directly put U.S. troops inside of Ukraine, or like directly give them more weapons that we're already giving them. But essentially, I think it's like I think that's like a difference without any real differences. Like, it's different in name only, pretty much. Yeah, I'm sure that joining NATO will cause a whole bunch of other, like, red tape to be crossed, pretty much. Like, if you have other treaties with neighboring countries, then joining NATO could probably really mess with that. It's kind of more of a symbol of the U.S. power that it has with the countries that are in NATO, rather than anything meaningful. Because, like, we're pretty much supporting Ukraine as though it were a part of NATO without actually saying that we're at war with Russia. To So again, I think it's like a distinguishment without a meaningful difference. All right, I want to finish this debate.
Ron DeSantis isn't president yet. I just don't think that's like in our field of vision right now. I think what we have to worry about first and foremost right now is the social ostracization, the various laws coming up in red states.
I mean,
like the problem right now just isn't Republican militias.
But I'm
More
not
damage
doing
is
this
going
to
to
the
be done to
exclusion.
that community through social and legal means.
But I don't oppose pursuing that means. And even if you had to wait for Ron DeSantis for this to come about, 2 years away is not a long time on the timescales that we're talking about here, right? I mean, but this isn't being done to the detriment of anything. You know, people can own guns and still go out and canvass for Democrats or whatever. I mean, I've done that.
This is being done to the detriment of people's well-being. Guns just raise the risk of you getting, you know, injured by the guns if you have a gun in your house. Gun violence. I don't know. There's like, yeah, you're just way more likely to get shot just by bringing a gun into your house. And it's not like a gun makes you bulletproof. Like owning a gun does not make you bulletproof against other people's guns. So it's very clearly being done to the detriment. Like not in rhetoric, but just in personal safety is being harmed by this claim that VAUSH is making.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess I do see where you're coming from here. So I guess I'm ready to move on to. I just have a couple more things I want to talk about.
Yeah, kill me.
But all right. So I want to talk about your language on black conservatives and how you say that if you're black and conservative, that inherently like makes you worse. As
he had VAUSH kind of like pinned up against some points, but he like didn't really go through with anything there. So pretty disappointing debate. What else do we have here? How and why I'm pro-gun. I mean, in this video, he says that he can't really like support. He knows guns don't really help you defend yourself against the government. I don't really care. I think it'd be cooler if everyone knew martial arts than if they owned a gun, and then they dressed up in black to defend trans people. That'd be way cooler. Is gun control the answer? Let's watch this. This is a short one. We have a treaty with Russia that we made when we joined NATO that said we could join NATO but could not have NATO or U.S. troops permanently stationed in Norway. Yet the Norwegian government chose to blatantly disrespect this treaty by having U.S. military bases, but swapping the personnel there every few months or so, and therefore they are not technically permanently stationed there. Hey, they found a loophole. I was going to say, you could have an American base if they don't have troops there. I mean, maybe if they send a Russian inspector, like everyone in the base can just like go hide out in the woods or something for 3 hours until the inspector leaves. All right, technically you don't have any NATO troops in station in Norway. All right, Sam Cedar, my God, never had a bad take.
Decoy Trick the $6. Cedar talks about your argument on gun ownership around 1 minute. Oh, a length that I do care about. Hold on. People have been referring to this.
All right, and then I'm going to be the off-the-gun take. I think I've, like,
Disco Stu, I'm a black man,
points.
and for a long time I was personally anti-gun ownership for the typical reasons. That was based on an assumption we lived in a somewhat civilized society. It's clearly not the case anymore, and I strongly advocate from those from marginalized groups to arm themselves quickly while they still can. Not for protection against...
Okay, so Sam Cedar is reading VAUSH'S tweet here, or X post or whatever, so I'll just rewind it.
People have been referring to this.
Disco Stu, I'm a black man, and for a long time I was personally anti-gun ownership for the typical reasons. That was based on an assumption we lived in a somewhat civilized society. It's clearly not the case anymore, and I strongly advocate from those from marginalized groups to arm themselves quickly while they still can. Not for protection against the government, but for protection against your conservative neighbors who the government will no longer protect you from. Fascism is here. I mean, the only problem with that...
I guess this is a guy that isn't VAUSH, but he's basically parroting VAUSH'S take.
calculation is there's no reason to believe that arming yourself from your conservative neighbors is going to be any more successful than arming yourself from home invaders. The bottom line is...
Exactly. Arming yourself from your conservative neighbors is going to be no more successful than arming yourself against home invaders. That's 100% true. And I would argue it'd be even less successful because if they're a conservative invader, you have even less of a chance than like catching a cat burglar by surprise and like blowing his face off with a shotgun.
You put a gun in your house, someone in your house is more likely to die. That's just...
Also, if you get killed...
Yeah, that's just statistics. Like, that is the epitome of a fact. Like, you cannot get more factual than that. It's been backed up by statistics everywhere. You put a gun in your house, someone there is more likely to get harmed by gun violence. So that is an unavoidable fact that really flies in the face of what Vaush is saying. Let's see how he reacts there. And I really hope that he doesn't say, oh, well, if you don't have a stable mental health balance, then you shouldn't buy a gun, because that's just a cop-out.
Then you gotta.
I don't think that follows logically.
What? He says I don't think that follows logically? Listen, it follows 100% logically. Actually, it's more than 100% logically. Like, don't... If Vaush is going to say, like, oh, well, an invasion is different because you can, like, prepare for that and not shoot yourself or your kid, then he should be prepared to advocate, don't buy a gun. Like, register for a local leftist armory that you can go to when shit goes down and you need to, like, defend yourself. Where you and the other leftists in your area code can go there and bunker down until the conservative militias have left. U.S. troops have a reputation for breaking the law and just generally behaving horribly. If the government does nothing when an American troop kills a civilian. Oh my god, it's so bad. I mean, it's really fucking bad. Like, our government doesn't do anything when Israeli troops kill American citizens either. So, yeah, it really seems like the United States and people that suck up to the United States do get a pass for just murdering innocent people. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I don't know how people in power, like in the State Department, can live with themselves, which is why I think a lot of people in the American State Department have resigned out of protest. That's something I would definitely do if I was in that position. And I do think that everyone that hasn't resigned should be tried for war crimes. I just think that's kind of unavoidable at this point in time. It's horrible, man.
The reason why home invaders are, like, the reason why having a gun in your house to defend against a home invader is really, like, dumb and generally ineffective, unless there's some specific knowledge that you have, is that home invasions happen suddenly and random.
Oh my god. So listen to how Vaush, like, frames this and inserts a little something that Sam Cedar didn't have, where he's like, oh, the reason why defending yourself against home invaders is usually ineffective, unless you have prior knowledge of something happening, is because you're going to be jumpy. Dude, that's so crazy. That's like, just think of it this way. If a guy says, I'm going to rob your house at 3 a.m. tomorrow night, how is having a gun going to make it easier for you to defend your house? Just all things being equal. If someone gave you prior warning of a home invasion and you had, like, a pistol in your house, would it be easier or harder to defend yourself without the pistol? And I would argue, if you have prior warning, it would be the same exact fucking thing. In fact, it would probably be harder. Because if you have prior warning, you can do different things to defend your house, like lock your doors, do extra locks in your doors that can't be picked, call the fucking police, say I've been harassed, I have this threat coming, call over your neighbors or your buddy that would hang out with you. You could hide behind the door and try to incapacitate the robber. The only thing having prior warning would, like, the only difference if you had a gun would be, like, you could murder the person, but that wouldn't really stop you from getting home invaded if they, like, make it into your house already anyway. And that's also assuming that you're good enough with a gun to basically be like a spec ops level operative where you can take out the home invader pretty easily. A lot of the times, even police who are trained... Yeah, exactly. Like, a gun does not protect your house. A gun does not make you bulletproof, especially if the person invading your house has a gun. And, like, the other point is, even police that have prior knowledge of crimes happening, they have guns, they have training, their job and their livelihoods depend on them being able to use this gun. Even police shoot bystanders. They miss the targets that they're aiming at, and they kill other people. They freak out. Having prior knowledge is not going to help. Like, having prior knowledge and a gun is not going to be able to having a gun is not going to be able to help you defend your house better, even if you have prior knowledge. Yeah, get a fucking dog, get friends. An extra person is always going to be more impactful than a gun, especially in a confined space like your house. You're much more likely to shoot your kid, shoot someone else, shoot your neighbor that's walking around, even if you have prior knowledge. So Vaush is just coping here, and I think you can kind of tell that he's coping. He loves guns. He has a gun collection. He's going like this. This is his I'm thinking and I'm not really sure body language. Like, also his tone of voice. I don't think that follows. And he's really grasping at straws here. Oh yeah, my Rottweiler. Watson, come here. Watson, come here. Well, we'll see if he comes. I think he's barking at something. My Rottweiler. Oh my god. All right, one sec. Hey. This is the guy that's gonna protect me. This is my gun. Anyway, let's just continue this clip.
By people who enter your house, usually prepared to kill you or
but
believing that you're not in the house.
He's
The
almost as
circumstances
annoying and ineffective as owning a gun.
of a home invasion are such that, like, the idea of arming to prepare yourself against it is kind of like dumb. It's like concealed carrying in case you get in like a mass shooting or whatever. It's the odds of it happening are so unlikely and such. The difference is with a big conservative uprising or like fascist marauders or militias in your area, that's something that you would have warning on, you know? Like if things fell apart, remember BLM?
Such a thin like strand of copium from Vaush here where he's like, oh well, you'd have warning about a massive conservative uprising, so like that's why having a gun against a massive conservative uprising is going to be more effective than like shooting a single scared guy that's trying to break in to like find money for his crack addiction. Like it's pretty fucking crazy here, especially when, you know, Vaush's example of this happening is the people driving around in Charlottesville. I don't think the citizens of Charlottesville had prior warning of right-wing militias entering their neighborhoods and driving around there with their pickup trucks. Like what news coverage is going to be like, oh well, we have a man on the inside of the local right-wing militia and there's rumblings that they're going to make a move on Charlottesville. It's pretty crazy. So again, like Vaush is usually a pretty reasonable guy. Like he's logical in his thinking. And I really think that his love of guns and just the persona that he likes to portray himself as is like the edgy, gun-toting leftist that like waves a pistol around and walks up with like a really nice rifle that he inherited from his grandpa is kind of like muddling his vision on this take. And like I've emailed Vaush. I've debated Vaush before. I emailed him about debating on guns, and he basically said like he's not doing gun debates anymore. He has leaned away from the gun topic. He's not really like involved in really pushing that. I think he's tried to make himself more mainstream, especially with all of the extra viewers he's getting with the 2024 election coming up. So yeah, he's not really interested in talking about this anymore, but I do think it's like one of his biggest issues.
When like the fucking red hats start driving around in trucks in your neighborhood, that's not like a split second, it happens like instant thing, you know? Like this is something you'd see it like unfolding on the news, you would hear reports of it.
No, that's actually bullshit. If the local right-wing militia, because they're going to be local because otherwise why would they come to your town, starts driving around, first of all, who's watching the news in this day and age? And then like if you're on Facebook or whatever, you're gonna, I don't know, maybe people are gonna post on Facebook, but believing that the news is gonna show up and be like, oh, you better watch out. There's going to be a truck full of right-wing crazy bastards driving into your neighborhood in about 20 minutes. Get your guns, everyone. That's so crazy.
Like it would like if it happened, it would happen gradually from outside the city, like moving inwards towards. You have time to prepare, and you would also be able to identify people when they're outside the house. It's not just like your conservative neighbor breaks into your house personally. It's like your neighborhood.
I love this. I love this mental image that Vaush is painting here, where these guys are coming in. He's in a previous video. He said they're coming in to conquer the neighborhoods. So like these guys are coming in trying to take over the houses, and you're just like pot shotting them with your pistol. Like what the fuck, dude? Again, a way better way to defend yourself is go to a buddy's house. Get the fuck out of there. Literally, in all self-defense situations, the best way to defend yourself is leave. Run away. Even if you're in a fight, you should run away. I watch MMA. Jorge Masvidal, one of the most badass MMA fighters in the game, said the best martial arts for self-defense is a quick right-hand sucker punch and a 50-yard sprint. You got to get the fuck out of there. And that's the same thing for these like political uprising, like violent uprising situations too. Yeah, seriously. I mean, Vaush has said, oh, well, if I could magically press a button and make all guns disappear in the world, I would do it. Which I think is a bit of his like reason coming out, like his reasonableness bearing its head. But it is, man, like you gotta at least start pushing for it. And I've said before, if I was able to do like any kind of policy that had a chance of happening, I'd say like, oh, you want guns? Okay, well, you can have the guns that the founding fathers were writing about in the Constitution. You can have like a flintlock musket. And if that's not good enough for you, well, tough shit. That's a skill issue. You can't hunt with that? That's too bad. You can't have fun with it? Go like take up poker or something. I don't give a fuck. You want to like be a big man? Go join an MMA gym or do jiu-jitsu or something.
Defending itself against like marauding groups of fascist
big trucks
militia
are
or
another
whatever.
thing. I think big trucks should be like, I don't think big trucks should be street legal, man. They're so annoying to park against. They take up like two parking spots.
You know what I mean?
Hold on,
like
this.
Marauding groups of fascist militia or whatever. You know what I mean? Yes, suicides and homicides are more likely when there's a gun in the house. I've never denied that. But you get what I mean, though. That's the difference, right? That assumes community organization. Even if you're just one person, like having one person in...
Man, like, guns aren't effective at stopping home invaders. Guns make it way more likely for you or someone you love to get injured because of gun violence. Yeah, dude, I hate big trucks. They're so dangerous for other people too. Like they just like crush people. And man, like if you have a big truck, should you really be parallel parking in the middle of the city with it? Like, is that what it's for? Buy a little tiny car. Oh my god, I'm so jealous. Cybertrucks are like a blight on the road, an eye blight.
A neighborhood. Bosh, I think you're massively overestimating how much most people track events. What? If there was a big fascist uprising where the government fell apart due to a constitutional crisis and like far right militias started moving in the cities, people would be aware of it. You know, don't get me wrong, political apathy is strong in this country, but not not to that point. I thought you said that doesn't follow. No, the fact that having a gun in your house.
Okay, so again, Vaush is kind of doing like a Mott and Barely here, where his first example of like a militia was in Charlottesville, and where like a lot of people didn't know about that, and they weren't really trying to take over cities. They were just doing a parade. They were doing a march. And then he's kind of like retreating to the, oh, well, you're going to need a gun when the government falls apart and there's a fascist uprising. Like there's a constitutional crisis. Like he says, so people will say to him, oh, well, that hasn't happened yet. Like that's such a rare example of something happening. And then Vaush will be like, well, it happened in Charlottesville. And then they're going to be like, well, like Charlottesville didn't really make it necessary for you to need a gun, and it was a like kind of a surprising event, so like a gun wasn't really effective there anyway. And then he's like, well, if the government falls apart, you're going to need a gun. And it's like, okay, so you're just kind of switching from position to position to whatever makes your argument the strongest. Oh, the highest rate of Tesla ownerships. You know what? I want to get like the 100% Chinese, like the 100% tariff Chinese electric vehicles. For my next car, I definitely want to buy an electric one.
Increases the likelihood of homicide or suicide does follow. That's not what I was referring to. I don't think there's a strong parallel between defending yourself against a home invader or defending yourself against a fascist uprising. Yeah, I think those...
I mean, the strong parallel is you're both trying to defend yourself, and in both scenarios, having a gun seems to be very minimizing. I mean, also notice that Vaush hasn't really taken it to the next level where, like, he hasn't completed the thought where, oh, well, okay, you're going to know that there's fascists coming into your neighborhood. Let's just assume that's true. How does a gun protect you against that? And he has never really talked about that. So my automod said that Breakiax, your shit box was automodded for being a sex phrase. It's fucking hilarious. I guess shitbox is a new sex term I didn't know about. Learning something new on Twitch here.
I think those are different, like, situations. I know people who are that blind to current events. Okay, well, then they're not the people who would be defending their neighborhood. When you said get to know your neighbors, what do you mean exactly? Get to know your neighbors. That used to be a thing people did normally, you know, before the internet. Like, if you live in some gay-ass part of town...
now he's kind of conflating gun ownership to knowing your neighbors, and I think those, like, have nothing to do with each other. It's kind of crazy here. I think he goes on to talk about, like a right-wing militia. Let's see if Sam Cedar talks about anything else.
Say, not as I do. I compensate for not knowing my neighbors by, supplying myself with unlimited ammunition and firearms, all right? Just listen, I'm compensating in other ways, okay? Not all of you can afford, like, 9 guns, all right? 9 guns and counting. Just finish the argument.
The gun on you, and it was a white neighbor that shot you. Cops aren't going to look into it. Or if you get killed by a cop and you have a gun on you, that's the end of the story. Their investigation's over. You were guilty.
Yeah, exactly. I have viewers, okay? If the shit's happening alarm takes place, I'll just hit the VAUSH'S mobilization button, and we'll all meet in, like, downtown Seattle and form a Roman phalanx.
Laura from Somerville. I'm gutted today, even though...
Okay, yeah, no. That's fine. Nice meme. Okay. God, it's so dumb. It's so fucking stupid, dude. It all does sound really stupid. There's no way of getting around it. This is all so dumb. You know how stupid I would have sounded if 10 years ago I was like...
Honestly, like, if Vaush was talking about the chance of a zombie uprising happening, I'd be way more into buying a gun. Like, dude, The Walking Dead kind of seems like a sweet universe to live in. Like, you can go fuck around. It's like a libertarian's dream, right? Oh, well, my goods and services are being exchanged for your goods and services. And then you do have a gun that actually, like, yeah, that a gun in that scenario would actually help you survive, because you can, like, just walk up to the zombie and pop it as it's about to try to bite you. But again, like, when you're fighting against guys with other guns, the guns don't seem to be doing that much, even in the Walking Dead universe.
Yeah, so the conservatives are going to get a Supreme Court majority, and then after that, like, they're just going to do, like, whatever. They're just going to do fucking whatever, and, like, nobody will stop them, you know? What do you think would have happened if Trump had succeeded in the coup?
I don't know. I don't really know what
Honestly,
he's talking about anymore.
What do you think would have happened?
But yeah, I think that's kind of funny. Like, in this video, he said he has 9 guns, and he also, like, fluctuates between, oh, well, you'd have 9 guns too if you got as many death threats as I do, and the position where owning guns in your house doesn't really help you defend yourself. So it's like this is a topic that Vaush has where he's really not consistent in his stances and kind of the statistics and facts surrounding the topic. And I think, I mean, I've said it before, but I think it's because he's a gun guy. He's basically an NRA member in the sense that they see themselves as owning guns, and guns is part of their personality. And so when you try to attack guns, it's an affront on their personality. Now, I do think Vaush has a point where it's politically untenable to, like, push for gun control in America. However, there are methods of gun control you can push for, and I think that, like, I think that all humans And especially Americans are really used to getting used to things. So I wonder how many guns there were in Australia when they did their gun buyback, but if you did a gun buyback, if you did a gun crackdown, people get used to it. Like, sure, they'd piss and shit and, like, cry themselves, but eventually they would get over it, and the world would be so much of a better place. I think America getting rid of guns would actually help outside of America, too. First of all, there would be less guns that people are buying from Americans. And then I think that there would also be like a cascade effect where America sets forth this standard that a lot of other countries would be like, oh, well, they did it, we can do it too. And just like the social and cultural impacts of it, where guns are less prevalent, school shootings are like less glorified in a way because they're happening less and less. And I think that would kind of have a cascading effect where school shootings happen less. In other countries, it would occur less as well. In terms of getting rid of guns, I really do think that like there's no great way where you can slow roll it. You almost need to just rip the Band-Aid off. Tell people that, yeah, we're gonna buy your guns back. You can have like rifles for hunting. That's fine. Like the main argument is, oh, well, I want it for hunting. You can have rifles for hunting. If you can't do it with a rifle, then like tough shit. Sure, suicides are still going to be bad. Domestic violence could still be bad if you have a gun. But like if you do a buyback program on pistols, then a lot of like gang violence will go down because it's much easier to conceal a pistol. And like I do think school shootings will go down. It's also easier to defend yourself against a rifle just because of the nature of its long barrel. And if people throw a hissy fit, then like essentially this is an issue where you're going to need the majority of the country on your side. It's going to almost be a national referendum vote and see what happens. I am interested in seeing what happens. Like I wonder what percentage of adult Americans are gun owners. Let me look that up actually. Percentage of adults owning guns, US. What percentage of Americans own guns? 32% of U.S. adults say they personally own a gun, while a larger percent, 44%, report living in a gun household. So one stat that people love to talk about is, oh, there's more guns than people in America. True, but that's because gun owners go fucking insane because it's a part of their personality. So, like, even Vaush, he has 9 guns, and he's like, I have 9 guns, and I'm counting. 32% of U.S. adults say they personally own a gun. It's in 44% of households, you could say. Actually, that's not even true. 44% of adults report living in a gun household. So, yeah, the majority of people in this country, the vast majority of people, if you're counting kids, don't own guns. And I do think that there, like, could be the political will if you had a politician that actually pushed for it and was just like, the statistics show that, you know, owning a gun doesn't protect you. It just makes things worse. We're going to, like, I think if you could pair it with, like, a crackdown on crime, people would be much more amenable to it and maybe even, like, do some other shit. Like, oh, we're going to hand out lightsabers because that's fucking badass. I don't know. But I do think that there could be the political will if there was a politician willing to, like, put themselves out there and potentially commit political suicide. Anyway, I'm going to call it for now. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. This was really fun. Had fun chatting with y'all. I'm going to post this on YouTube, and I think I'm going to be, like, streaming some more. Yeah, I think, like, there has been precedent set of extremely, like, restricting gun access. So I don't think that's like an insane thing to say. And I think when Vaush says, oh, well, we shouldn't even talk about it because it's politically unfeasible. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, just say it's anti-crime. Oh, well, like, we can't really sell guns because then the scary criminals that live in the inner city could buy them and shoot each other or shoot you. I don't know. I think that, like, it could be done, just no one really wants to do it. You just need like a buff guy to go up there and be like, it's unmanly to have a gun. I kill people with my bare hands. And then see what they say. Have an MMA fighter do it that's not like brain dead. Anyway, I think Vaush is kind of brain dead on this, but like he's been doing pretty good. The election coverage is fun. I kind of want to like cover some fun debates that has been posted to YouTube recently. But that would be interesting. Make a law where all guns have to be pink. That could actually be a good idea. It'd make them more visible. It'd make people like less interested in buying it. That'd be funny too. Oh, and then the other idea that I had about actual gun control is like in the Constitution it says that access to a well-regulated militia has to be necessary for your right to bear arms. So I think you could make the rule that like if you want to own a gun, you have to be enrolled in like a federal or state level militia program where like the gun is basically regulated. And like, oh yeah, you can have your gun. Just like walk down to your local militia office or local armory and grab it. Check it out, sign it out. You can go shoot guns with your buddies, go hunting with your buddies that are also part of the militia. Say you're going to defend yourself against like home invaders with your buddies. Have a hotline there, like a local militia in Norway. I think that is the way to go because just people like isolated households having guns and kind of like the castle doctrine here in America where if someone walks onto your property, you're legally allowed to kill them. That's just so insane, dude. Like the paranoia that breeds, just the dangerousness of having your guns be available for everyone in the household. That's crazy. Anyway, I'm going to go eat lunch, so I'm going to call it for now, but I might be streaming later today. And I do want to start streaming more just because like it's fun to talk about the election. It's fun to nitpick at kind of like the people that I'm watching every day. Trying to give myself like a bit of a platform. So, you know, fuck them.